rocket pass. I check distance from the target, my altitude, make sure my switches are set correctly, and then I roll in. I fine-tune my aim point, hit the weapons release button, 7 rockets come down on the enemy location. I immediately just kind of pull away from the ground, away from the threat, trying to climb up to get my altitude and airspeed back. And boom! There's this bright flash as I'm rocked in the cockpit. I feel and hear this loud explosion at the back of the airplane. I'm hit. The jet noses over and points down at Baghdad below. The ground is getting closer, and I know I might have to eject. I pull back on the control stick, and nothing happens. I quickly try to analyze the situation. Master caution light, caution pail, hydraulic lights, hydraulic gauges, they're at 0. The system is completely depleted, and I am now plunging to the ground, completely out of control. Ejection handles? Not yet. So about the last thing I want to do is potentially eject into the hands of the enemy. And so I know I have to make every second count. I set aside my fear, I focus on taking action, and I engage the backup emergency system. Slowly, that airplane starts to climb up and away from Baghdad. And it's the first moment I feel like I can make it out of here alive. Now, when my airplane was hit, and in those, we'll call it roughly 20 seconds that passed, which felt like an eternity, I was very aware of all the things that could go wrong, because there were a lot of them. But I had to focus on what was most important first. I knew I had to make a decision if I was going to survive. I didn't have time to ask for help. I didn't even have time to open a checklist. I just had to react. And thankfully my training kicked in, and I was able to respond and take action in that critical situation. So now that my airplane is flying, I want to focus on my next priority, which is to get out of Baghdad. Because I know that if I still have to eject, my chances of survival and rescue will be much better if I'm outside the city. So we make our way south, we finally get above the weather, and then my flight lead just pulls up next to me to do a battle damage check, essentially just to look over at my airplane. So he keys the radio to tell me the news, and he says, "Casey, you have hundreds of holes in your fuselage and tail section, and a hole, well, it's about the size of a football in the back horizontal stabilizer." I was like, this does not sound good, right? I'm kind of surprised the airplane's still flying at this point, but it is an A-10. So it turns out that a missile hit the back of the airplane, sent shrapnel through the fuselage and tail section, damaging my flight control systems. Unfortunately, we never saw it coming. But the good news, right? The good news is that the A-10 was built to take hits. It was designed to take hits while performing its mission. So if we lose one hydraulic system, the other takes over. If we lose both systems, which is what happened in my case, then we have a backup emergency system called manual reversion. Simply a system of cranks and cables. There are people in this room that probably know the system better than I do, but this system allows us to fly this airplane in this backup mechanical manual mode. I kind of equate it to old school flying. But because I'm in this backup mode, I know I have a decision to make. I can either fly this airplane back to friendly territory and eject, or I fly it back and attempt to land. I kind of feel like this decision has the potential to be the difference between life and death, and it weighs heavily on me. You see, we actually only train in manual reversion. We do it once during our initial training, just to kind of get a feel for how our airplane will respond. But manual reversion landings, it's not something that we practiced at all. In fact, our checklist for manual reversion landings, it says attempt under ideal conditions only, right? Because, there's an ideal emergency out there. But this is what our checklist says. And so I know trying to land is a risk. But I also feel like I have some factors going my way. I have a very experienced flight lead with me providing mutual support. Wind's back at our home base or straight down the runway. And I have about an hour to fly this airplane and figure it out. At the same time, I'm very aware of the manual reversion landings that happened before mine. There were actually 3 of them during Operation Desert Storm, and sadly, they were not all successful. On the first attempt, the pilot was killed when he crashed on landing. On the second attempt, the pilot was able to get the airplane on the ground, then swerved on and off the runway several times due to lack of brakes and steering. The airplane was destroyed, but he was very lucky to survive. And then there was this third situation, which was a glimmer of hope, because the pilot was able to get the airplane on the ground safely. What's most important, I knew about these stories. I knew about the lessons learned. So even though those pilots weren't with me that day over Baghdad, their stories were, their experiences were, and I remembered it when I needed it most. When we have the courage to share our stories and those experiences, even if they expose mistakes or weaknesses, the stories and the lessons learned can help make other people better. And as an aviation team, as a community, we owe it to each other to share the stories, to share the lessons learned, to elevate the performance of our team. So now I have an hour. I have an hour to make this decision. Do I land? Do I eject? If I'm honest, I'm nervous. I'm nervous to make the choice. And there's part of me that wants my flight lead to just make the decision for me, right? Just tell me what to do, because that will be a whole lot easier. Instead, he says, Casey, you're flying a single-seat fighter. The decision is yours, and I will back you up no matter what you decide. Well, that was really empowering and slightly terrifying at the same time. But he had confidence in me because I had come to the cockpit prepared. And his confidence in me, it gave me confidence in myself. I was confident in my training and preparation. I thought through the situation. I evaluated the pros and cons. I understood the risk involved. But I was confident I could land this airplane safely. However, this trip back to base, I will tell you that it's one of the longest hours of my life because I didn't really know what was going to happen. Would my airplane make it back? Would I crash? Would I survive? But I had to push those thoughts out of my mind and just focus on the task at hand. Because flying back to base, not just mentally exhausting, it was physically exhausting as well. I've actually heard some other pilots talk about flying in manual reversion, that it might be like driving a dump truck or a semi-truck without power steering. Not something I've done, but I can tell you that flying that airplane, the 300 miles, hour of flight time in an A-10 back to our home base, it was exhausting. But we finally crossed back into friendly territory. We contact the tower controller or the supervisor of flying just to let them know that we're on our way in. And it's a huge relief to be back in friendly territory, but now I have to land the airplane. And they tell us that rescue helicopters are on alert in case I have to eject. Crash recovery team is waiting for me in case the worst happens. I don't actually want to use either of those teams, but it's just reassuring to know that they're there, right? There's this whole team waiting for me. This whole team has my back. And now it's time for me to make my first radio call. Because prior to this, my flight lead, he's done all the communication, all the coordination for me, providing that mutual support. And now it's my turn. And I am determined to sound good on the radio, right? If I sound good on the radio, well, I convince everyone, including myself, that I've got this. So what do? Well, I practice a few times in the cockpit first, and then I make the call. Yard 06, emergency, gear down, full stop. Now what happens next I have relived many times over the past 20 years. And every time I talk about it, I can see it, I can hear it, and I can feel it. And so I start down that final approach. 60 feet to go. I cross the landing threshold, and out of nowhere, the airplane just starts this quick roll to the left. And my heart skips a beat. Am I going to crash? Is the airplane going to flip over on its back? Do I even have time to eject? I quickly yank the stick back to the right, and that airplane levels out. And then 30 feet, and I am just thinking, please just let me make it. And then 10 feet, hold it steady, almost there, and then thump. And the main gear and nose gear. And the airplane is on the ground. Fire trucks are rolling toward me, and I slowly bring this jet to a stop. It is a huge relief to be back on the ground with my team in friendly territory. But the best part, it's hearing their words over the radio, because several of the pilots had been standing by, watching and waiting for my return. And I will never forget the words I heard from them that day. Nicely done, KC. Welcome home. Yeah. So now I'm on the ground, and I cannot wait to get out of the airplane to see the extent of the damage, because I had no idea what it looked like. We have mirrors in the A-10, and I tried to angle those mirrors back to see the damage, but I couldn't see anything. All I had was the indications in my cockpit. So I hop out of the airplane. There's a bunch of Marine firefighters there waiting to see me, and walk to the back of the jet. And I will tell you, I am shocked and amazed at the amount of damage that this airplane took and still kept flying. That missile hit the horizontal stabilizer, sent the shrapnel into the fuselage and tail, which is where it damaged the flight control systems. Obviously, some of you are very familiar with the A-10, but those that aren't, that back fuselage is probably the most narrow part on the airplane where the hydraulic lines come together. And after an opportunity after I landed, put my head into that fuselage, and I could see that the right hydraulic line was completely sheared, and the left line had a hole from shrapnel big enough in it that the system depleted instantly. Could also see that this is actually the piece that is in the museum here, this part of the tail. The dark spot up here, that's the honeycomb, the kind of the underside of the airplane. My flight lead on the way back, he never told me this, by the way. He told me after the fact, but that there were pieces of the airplane actually flying off as I made my way back. He was really good. I mean, he only told me the things that I needed to hear, but he said afterwards there were actually pieces of the airplane kind of flying off, and I'm glad he didn't tell me that at the time. And then number 2 engine, the right engine, it really took, I mean, you can see a significant amount of shrapnel damage. The fan blades also had some damage out on the front part. The whole way home, I would say on multiple occasions, my flight lead asked me, how's that number 2 engine doing? And I kept thinking, like, why are you asking me about my engine? I have a hydraulic problem, not an engine problem. I had no indications at all about any sort of engine troubles. I mean, it truly a testament to the durability of the engines. And then you can see the bottom there is the underside, the back side of the airplane. It was charred, covered with hydraulic fluid. At some point, a fire happened, but I could actually push on the airplane, and it was soft to the touch. Again, the amount of damage that this airplane took and kept flying and kept me safe. I mean, it really is a testament to many of you in here, but to all of those who designed, built, and maintained this incredible airplane. So after I got to see the airplane, the next people that I wanted to see, my crew chiefs. So Senior Airman Randy Andrus and Staff Sergeant Ian Morris, they were back at home base, kind of waiting for my return. And we put an incredible amount of trust in our maintenance team. And in return, they don't want to let us down. They want us to succeed. My crew chiefs made sure that my airplane could fly under any circumstances, even after extensive battle damage, which is kind of why I wanted to see them, right? I kind of felt like I needed to apologize for bringing their jet back in that condition. So I got to ride back to my parking spot, and the whole way back, I'm just thinking about, what do I say? I mean, how do you actually apologize for essentially destroying somebody's airplane, right? Well, we pull into the parking spot, I hop out, and I look up at Ian, and he has the biggest smile on his face. And he grabs my hand and he says, "Ma'am, welcome home. We're glad you're safe." I didn't have to say anything at all. We truly were a team that came together in a stressful situation. And when you trust the members of your team, you value their expertise, you create an environment where your team can excel. Well, after my crew chiefs, the next person that I got to see was my flight lead, Lieutenant Colonel Rick Turner. He was absolutely critical in helping me to get home safely. He provided that guidance and support when I needed it most. But that's exactly what wingmen and teammates, that's what we do for each other. We have each other's back. So when the adrenaline is pumping, we're feeling overwhelmed, that wingman, our teammate, can step in, help us to see the bigger picture. And that mutual support, it's critical over Baghdad, but it's also critical in our personal and professional lives as well. Now, this mission, this deployment, it was a success because we worked together as a team. We had created this wingman culture on our team where we were part of something bigger and more important than ourselves. We knew we needed to support each other, encourage each other, but also push each other to be at our best. We understood that individual performance was critical for shared success. From the youngest wingman to the most experienced instructor, we each understood the role that we played and where we fit into that bigger picture. From those who designed, built, and maintained the airplane to the pilots who flew it, everyone had a role to play to achieve mission success. Now, this mission, this deployment, it was a defining moment in my life. It really taught me a lot about myself. It pushed me well outside my limits, outside my comfort zone, but it showed me what I was capable of doing in one of the most difficult situations in my life. And I would be remiss if I didn't have the opportunity tonight to say thank you to so many of you who made this mission possible, who made this airplane possible. You're the reason that I'm able to stand here today to tell the story, because I flew an amazing airplane designed and built and maintained by incredible people. So thank you. It's an incredible opportunity to be here with so many of you. And I know there's several of you I got to see 20 years ago when I was here for the very first time, but it means a lot to me to come back, to be able to share the story, to see familiar faces, and just say thank you. What you did, what you continue to do, truly make a difference. So thank you very much. I will stop talking now, and I would love to take your questions. Yes.
Hi, I'm a volunteer here, and we tell your story. We thank you very much all the time. Every visitor I take show the exhibit with your tale and your picture, and we talk about how proud we are of you and how amazing you are. We want you to know that. I think I speak for all the volunteers who are here.
Thank you.
It's an incredible story, but I just wanted to ask, I'll add a little detail. Was it what is it called, the Stryker missile that hit your airplane, the ground, fired from a ground soldier?
So, can all of you hear the questions up back? Or, okay, the question was about the missile, what hit the airplane. And I guess the unfortunate truth is we don't ever really know. At the time, there was a team that was supposed to come in, an intelligence team that was going to evaluate what actually hit the airplane. But at the time, they were only allowing boots on the ground to come into theater, just because they needed more boots on the ground. And so if you weren't directly impacting boots on the ground, they kind of stopped support personnel coming in for a period of time. And so they did, with the crew that were there, they did a little bit of evaluation, and they never really figured out exactly what it was. They don't believe that it was a man pad, which is what's launched, kind of a shoulder-launched missile. There's several missiles that they kind of looked at to think about what it was. And without getting into classified information, there were some characteristics of where this missile hit, the way that it hit, that kind of led them down a path. We found very little shrapnel in the airplane. At least we did. I don't know if they did during the teardown, find more. Somebody here probably knows. But we found very little shrapnel in the airplane. We did find 2 screws that coincide with a Russian-built missile, but that's no surprise because that's most of the missiles that are out there that are threats are predominantly built by Russia. So not really a huge surprise there. But no, we never really figured out exactly what it was. We have plenty of ideas, but.
Can you take one more question that you have? Again, I'm going to use that now in my presentation. But the other thing is the airplane was repaired. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So
that we'd like to know because visitors do ask that.
So there are the airplane. While we were in Kuwait, there was a team from Hill Air Force Base, aircraft battle damage repair team, that came out to try to fix the airplane. I got to meet with a couple of people that had come out to try to fix the airplane, and they really tried to patch some of the holes. And what turned out to happen is that we were moving all of our aircraft from Al Jaber into Tallil Air Base in Iraq, and there just wasn't enough time to fix the airplane. There were a lot of holes. I think maintenance officers now go through a course where they count the number of holes on the airplane and talk about it, and I think it was over 600 from all the shrapnel. So a lot of holes, too much to repair, not enough time. So they sadly chopped the airplane up in pieces to send it home in crates. It found its way to the boneyard for a period of time, then ended up at Northrop Grumman, where they did some testing. This is my words because there are obviously people in this room that were part of that, and maybe they can contribute. But they did some testing on the airplane. I got to see it at that point. And from there, several of the pieces of the airplane ended up in different museums. And there's a piece here. There's a piece in the Smithsonian, there's a piece at the 99s Museum, and there's another museum in New York that I'm drawing a blank on that has a piece of the airplane. And then, and I have a few pieces myself that were given to me in my maintenance. I have the stick and the eye of the airplane that was cut out and provided to me. That should have been provided maybe 20 years ago, but I recently just got it. I was out at Hill Air Force Base, and they gave me the eye off the airplane. And now the new 987, because it looks very nice, is on display at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base on a stick. I don't know how much of the core airplane is there, but it's the tail number is there, 987, on display as a tribute to everyone that was part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. What did I miss?
No, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes?
Did you ever connect with the soldiers on the ground that you were supporting that day? And did they ever tell you what they saw happen?
So I guess this is the story of irony, is one of the soldiers on the ground that day happened to be a member of our A-10 squadron. I guess he's not truly a soldier, but he was with the 3rd Infantry Division. So one of the things that A-10 pilots do, usually the lieutenants, are battalion air liaison officers, which means that they deploy with the Army. So some of our pilots deployed with the Army on the ground during Iraqi Freedom. I think maybe 3 to 5 of them. And John Blocher was on the ground that day with the 3rd Infantry Division. So I got firsthand account of actually exactly what happened that day. Just I have to say, when you meet the troops on the ground that you support, it reminds you exactly why you do what you do. I got a note later from that same unit on a napkin. They wrote, I think I'm okay. I tried not to say cuss words earlier with the students, but it said, "Thanks for saving our ass over Baghdad." And, those are the notes that make the difference. I have to tell you, I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but I've had several people reach out on social media. Probably most recently, I got a note from a daughter, and it said, I'm going to tear up again, because it said, I wouldn't be here today if you hadn't been able to save my dad. But that's why A-10 pilots do what we do. It's that exact thing, because it truly makes a difference in helping people get home safely. Yes, sir.
I read a lot of accounts from soldiers who fight on the ground in not only Iraq but Afghanistan, especially special ops soldiers. And more often than not, it's an A-10 that always helps them out. And they need it because they really don't carry a lot of firepower. And plus, they're usually greatly outnumbered. And usually it's A-10s that come and bail them out when needed.
Yeah,
help out.
the A-10s really, I think we really have a special relationship with special operators. We do a lot with them. I think, at least in my time before Iraqi freedom, before Enduring Freedom, we did a lot of training with them. And we really got to understand how they operate. I suppose the other benefit that goes a little bit back to your question too is at Bagram, we would brief with the special ops teams before they went out to the field. So we would see them in advance and we would see them after our mission. If they were injured, we went to see them at the hospital at Bagram. And so we really developed a really great relationship with them. It's part of the reason today I'm on the board of the Special Operators Transition Foundation, because I felt like I had supported special ops for so long. It's a way for me to support them in the second chapter as well. And sorry, you probably had a question. I just started talking, but did you have?
They're truly great, those guys. I wish more people would read just what they go through.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, they're usually greatly outnumbered.
Yeah.
And they're great. They're heroes in my.
They're heroes in my book too. I mean, I think our special operators do tremendous things, and they definitely made a difference both in Iraq and Afghanistan. All the way in the back.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you very much for doing what you did. I appreciate it, just like everybody else. My question is, how many deployments did you have to combat situations, and how many missions have you flown?
Okay, let's see. I have, I deployed in 2002, early 2002 to Afghanistan for Enduring Freedom. That was eye-opening. I finished my A-10 training in 2001, and we deployed a few months later. Talk about needing to be ready. We turned around a few months later and went to Iraq in 2003 for Iraqi freedom. And then we went back to Afghanistan in 2005 for Enduring Freedom. And then I went in 2010, not as an A-10 pilot, but as an individual augmentee on the ground in Kabul. Not my favorite deployment, turns out, as an individual augmentee to work at USAF Joint Command in Kabul, running the air war. So one of those deployments I came home for a couple months and went back. I think it's 5 total deployments. I have 117 combat missions. I don't know what the hours is on those, but 117 between the multiple deployments.
Have you had any other problems besides this one?
Nothing quite like this. No, thank God. No, nothing quite like this. I've had some scary moments in combat, for sure, but this by far, might as well get it out of the way early, right? Happened on one of my first deployments as a wingman. When I first started flying the A-10, my first fighter squadron, I was the only woman, and I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself. I didn't want to make mistakes. I felt like if I made a mistake or if I did something wrong, then I would ruin it for the women that followed me. So it was a ton of pressure, and it was pressure that I put on myself. But it meant that I worked really hard to be really good at what I was doing. I think my teammates, my brothers, as I call them, really respected me for that. It turns out, the benefit of something like this happening early in your career is that I really proved that I could do just about anything in this airplane, and I earned the respect of my squadron and beyond. And really the question of could women fly in combat, it was just not really a question after this. Nobody ever asked the question. So I think, blessing in disguise, things like this happen, and I was able to prove myself very early in my career. Yes, Marguerite.
If you can say, how are we now going to protect the soldiers and Marines and special ops folks?
Yeah. I can say anything, I'm retired. So the question was about, now with the potential sunset, I'm going to say potential, of the A-10, how do we protect our troops on the ground? This is frustrating for me. I would love to see the A-10 life extended. And there is a part of me that is hopeful that a new administration, there's just people, maybe there's a chance. I know that, we've kind of pushed some things along in terms of maintenance and logistics and things that are unfortunate for the A-10 community. But I still have hope. But that's just retired me having hope because I love the airplane so much. That being said, A-10 pilots, we obviously believe very strongly in what we do. And so we're trying to find, I say we because I'm still connected with many of them, but we try to find ways of how do we then continue this mission of close air support. And that's really what it's about. Yes, a platform matters, but more importantly, how do we train for it? How do we keep the expertise? The F-35 is not the solution because we're not training. F-35 pilots are not training in close air support. If you don't train for close air support, you will not be good at it. And so really what we're looking at now is potentially the F-16, and that's where a lot of our A-10 pilots have gone to, is the F-16 community. And so I think we all feel a little bit of a burden, a responsibility to pass on the lessons that we've learned to this next generation. And if it's another platform, so be it. Everybody, I think, would prefer that there was that we could extend the life of the A-10. But to me, it's about, we have to train for it if we're going to be good at it. Is the F-16 my choice for close air support platform? No. But you know what? We've learned to do it. Everybody's had to pick up the close air support mission over the years because we spent 20 years in a conflict where we had to do close air support. So my hope is that the pilots will continue that passion, because I think the passion for the mission is important, the relationships that we have with our ground troops, and then the training. But I think we're in a bit of a tough spot. That's the truth. Yes.
Hi. I just want to thank you for your service and tell you I can't wait to read the book. And I love the title.
Oh, thank you. And just in case there's a question, I will be signing the books afterwards. They really wanted me to sign them afterwards. So I will sign books. And I know there are a few of you where they ran out of books. And so a couple options. One is I will have a signed book plate, which is a sticker. So if you got the book, you can have a signed book plate to put in the front of the book. I have some of those that I brought with me. And I can also give you my email, and we can work something out where I can send you a signed book. So a quick story about the title of the book. It's Flying in the Face of Fear. There were plenty of people that told me, like, don't put fear in the title. People don't want to talk about fear. And I was like, that's exactly why it's going in the title, because we don't want to talk about it. But I talked to a group of young women today, some students that were here today. And really my message with that, and the kind of the idea behind the book, is the reality that we can face fear in our lives. And I was terrified on this mission. Of course I was scared. I mean, I didn't think I was, because I'm a fighter pilot, we're invincible. And then I went back and listened to the audio, and I could hear this fear in my voice, right? And I realized that it's not the fear that matters. It is all about what we do in those moments. And so that's my message to young people, to leaders, that you can face fear, doubt, and worry all you want in your life. That's a pretty normal thing, but you've got to be able to do something about it. And so that's the story behind the title. Yes?
I have a question.
Okay.
Did you actually feel when you were hit by the surface-to-air or air-to-air missile?
Did I feel it?
Did you
Yeah.
actually feel it in the cockpit itself?
Yeah, so what I equate it to is kind of like if you're in a car and another car rear ends you at high speed. It was just like the whole jet kind of shook and then it pushed over because it hit me kind of while I was in a turn, and the whole jet just kind of shuddered. I saw a bright red-orange fireball, and it kind of dumped the whole airplane. So, I mean, it's kind of a moment of shock. And I remember like time slowed down. Because I could, you know, I could remember some very strange things like the color of the Tigris River and looking at the ground getting closer and having these thoughts about ejecting, and that's not great, and you know, you just, mind slows down. And also, you know, the reality is we train for these moments, and so I completely fell back on my pilot training technique of maintain aircraft control, which I could not do, analyze the situation, take the proper action, land as soon as conditions permit. So all these things are kind of floating through my mind, but yes, I absolutely felt it. It was no doubt in my mind what had happened. It really felt like, you know, a huge kind of just collision at the back of my airplane. Yes?
Do you know approximately what altitude you were at when the incident occurred?
I do. I was at about 7,000 feet, which is low. That's not really where we want to be. Unfortunately, there was the weather deck that day. The weather tops were 20,000 feet, and then we were just below the weather. You know, it's hindsight, right? We made a decision based on the threat level that we would do 2 passes, climb up, reassess. This was on my second pass. But what do? Ground troops need help. You're going to go in and do everything you can. All right, questions over here. Yes, sir.
This A-10 is an amazingly effective design, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
it's proven itself for decades. But there's a lot of really interesting stories about its early days, and that's probably before you were born. When it first was brought into service, the Air Force pilots were not thrilled with it, because it wasn't sleek, sexy, and supersonic. The 3 things they always wanted, and they could be flying F-15s, F-16s, and when you got into this position where you were assigned to fly A-10s, did you find any of that reticence on the part of other pilots? That I could have been lucky and gotten an F-15 or...
No, you know, we kind of take pride in like being the airplane that's not sleek or sexy or supersonic. I think we know we've never been a favorite of the Air Force, and so I think like as A-10 pilots, we take super pride. Like we think it's like a badge of honor for us, right? We're like, you know, the stepchild, or that's probably not appropriate. You know, something that nobody wants. So it was like this. I don't know. I think for us, it was all about the mission. The A-10 is now it's one of the top airplane that young pilots want, because I love my F-15 brothers. I don't know if there are any in here, but like for 20 years, we did exactly what we were trained to do. Exactly what we were trained to do. And so some of and I will tell you, the number 1 pilot in my pilot training class, he took an F-15. They didn't really do the mission in combat like we did. And so I think I will tell you now, I know some specific young pilots who really want to fly the A-10 and are really sad that it's on their way out. So the DeRubio family is here, and I sponsored their son when he was a cadet at the Air Force Academy. He's now a lieutenant at pilot training. And so these are the young people that want to fly A-10s. I mean, there are pilots who want the A-10 now, knowing that they will only fly it for maybe a year or 2. Like, that's how much they love the airplane. I think it's just a badge of honor. Like, we so believe in the mission and what we do in this airplane, and it may be ugly, but it's beautiful to us.
I've always said this was probably the best example of a mission-specific design being totally successful. Where you look at F-35, they're trying to do 6 things, multi-service, and that doesn't really work out. It's never worked out in the aircraft design world. And this is probably the best example of a mission-specific design that is probably as effective as any aircraft could have been.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's designed to do exactly what it was supposed to, and they kept a mostly single mission, so that it's very good at what it does.
It's really sad to see it sundown.
Absolutely. Yes?
First a comment, then a question. You mentioned you talked about the decommissioning and sunsetting of the aircraft.
Yeah.
Because of the history and the stories behind the aircraft, they decided to use that aircraft in the movie Terminator Salvation, based on the fact that how robust and bulletproof
Yeah.
later. So just keep that in mind. They said in the movie, it's the only aircraft that survived the revolution.
The A-10 has a kind of a cult following. I mean, it really does. There's
And my question is, when you did that deployment and you came out of the clouds and you got into below the weather and you saw the ground activity, did you engage and use your 30-millimeter gun in the nose of your aircraft?
Yes, we did. We did a gun pass and then a rocket pass.
Wow. Did you use all 1,200 rounds in your...
Oh, no. I mean, no. A combat burst for us is 2 to 3 seconds. You're 70 rounds per second. So, no, I mean, we only did one pass of guns and then we used rockets. So, if you can imagine, I mean, this target area, it's downtown Baghdad. It looks like an overpass, a freeway overpass that you would see everywhere here. We're trying to get below, like underneath that without taking out the bridge. We don't want to drop bombs on the bridge because we want the U.S. forces and coalition forces want to use the bridge. So we're trying to shoot underneath this bridge. Interesting tactical problem, but guns and rockets work for that.
You want to take one more?
Oh, it went so fast.
Okay.
There's 3 hands. Can I take 3 more? We'll go over here because I like when kids ask questions.
Thank you so much for your service. And as someone who's deeply inspired by aviation, the A-10, and your experience in this unique and memorable aircraft, was there a particular captivating part of flying it generally? And have you always wanted to fly the A-10?
Yes and yes. So did I always want to fly the A-10, and what did I love most about it? Kind of the flying that captivated me. For me, it was all about the mission. That's why I wanted to fly the airplane. I didn't care that it was, it wasn't sleek or sexy. To me, it was the mission and supporting our ground troops. That was just something that I felt really passionate about. What did I love flying about the airplane? I love the mission. I love shooting the gun. It's really actually very fun when you shoot the gun. So the first time we shoot the gun in the airplane, go out to the range. We have an instructor right behind us, making sure that we're not going to do anything wrong. But when you pull the trigger, the whole jet shakes. I mean, this airplane is built around a 19-foot long 30-millimeter Gatling gun, and you're sitting on top of it. So the whole jet shakes. You can smell the gun gases, you can see the gun gases, and then you see the bullets hitting the target. In training, it's like a little sparkle on some metal, but it's still really cool because you hit the target. So shooting the gun is cool. I think my final flight in the A-10, I got to lead a four-ship of my classmates and guys that I flew with back in this 2003 mission. And we took off. And I think we got above 100 feet, like maybe twice, but we stayed at about 100 feet, rooting around the Barry Goldwater Range. Think like Star Wars Canyon, through the terrain, popping up and over, popping up only to shoot the gun, and then back in the terrain. I mean, like, it's pretty cool. All right, I think these are the last two, because they told me my time's up. We'll go back there first.
Some people say drone technology today and in the future will change warfare completely.
It probably
Based
will.
on your experience, what's your thought about drone technology?
So drone technology and how it will change. I would be naive if I said I didn't believe that at some point we would have more drones and probably more cockpits without pilots. Seems crazy to me, but that is probably the way of the future. I have to get beyond this idea of like the wars that we have fought. To me, I don't understand. This is me, right? Personally, it's hard for me to comprehend the decision-making capability, the decisions that we have to make as A-10 pilots. Listening on the radio to who's screaming the loudest to determine who you're going to give close air support to. There's things that, to me, it's really hard for me to understand when you don't have a human in the loop. How does that happen? That's my personal struggle, but I think, the future of warfare, I don't know how many years it's likely that that is the future, drones and pilotless aircraft. But it's, for this pilot, it's hard to think about. It just seems that there's so many decisions that we make that we're analyzing I mean, you're making decisions based on the information that you have in front of you, and tone of voice and the radio, and trying to understand the stress levels that people are under, and those are just things. It's hard for me to understand how a drone can do that, but I'm sure that's the way of the future. It's in all the movies, right? So it's got to be. Yes, sir.
The A-10 is obviously built for the Cold War tank war.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have a chance to exercise the A-10 against a column of tanks?
Not a column of tanks, but a tank, yes. So, yeah, we, during Operation Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom was very different in Afghanistan, obviously. There were not many, were not, past tense, there were not many tanks there at the time. But Iraqi Freedom was very different. I mean, there were tanks, we saw kind of traditional weapon sets, missiles systems and things like that. So, yeah, we got to use the A-10 and a lot of the weapons against some very traditional targets. But awesome airplane, awesome mission. All right, I will be around later. I'll be around all night, I guess, until they kick us out, to answer additional questions, to sign books. But thank you very much, truly. I know there's so many of you who are very passionate about this. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.